Welcome back to today's Explainer. We're setting our sights on the West Coast today to unpack a truly fascinating real estate anomaly that unfolded in Fresno, California back in July of 2026. If you've been keeping tabs on the housing market lately, you know the overall narrative, right? It's been one of cooling temperatures and softening prices pretty much everywhere. But Fresno? Well, Fresno clearly didn't get that memo. Today, we're going to dig right into the data, look at exactly what happened, and most importantly, we're going to understand exactly why Fresno home prices actually rose when almost everywhere else saw them fall.
Section 1. The Fresno Pricing Anomaly.
Okay, so picture this. When we look at broader national trends in mid-2026, everyone was expecting a cooling market. High rates and general market fatigue were supposed to finally give buyers a break. And sure enough, the national median list price took a noticeable dip, falling 2.4% down to just under $429,000. But, as we all know, real estate is famously hyper-local. What happens at the macro level doesn't always translate to your specific neighborhood. In Fresno, the median list price didn't drop at all. No, it actually climbed 0.9% year over year, hitting $479,500. So how on earth does a mid-sized California city push prices higher right in the middle of a national cooldown?
Section 2. Why home prices rose.
All right, let's dive right into this. To solve the mystery, we really have to look at how many homes were actually available for buyers to, buy. The main culprit behind this localized price bump is heavily tied to one specific number: 2,119. That was the total number of active listings in Fresno during this period. So instead of inventory piling up like you might expect, the pool of available homes was actually shrinking, dropping 0.3% year over year. When demand stays steady but the supply of homes gets smaller, well, sellers suddenly find themselves with a unique upper hand, and prices become incredibly resilient.
It creates this brilliant little squeeze. While Fresno's active listings shrank, inventory across the broader U.S. market actually grew by 2.1%. Nationally, buyers simply had more choices than they did a year prior, which naturally leads to those softer prices we were just talking about. But in Fresno, buyers had fewer choices. It's like a high-stakes game of musical chairs, and this gap in inventory is exactly what kept Fresno meaningfully more competitive than the broader national trend.
And that squeeze, it's even more apparent when you look at the pipeline of fresh inventory. Only 906 new listings popped up in Fresno. That's a 0.9% drop year over year. So not only is the overall active inventory down, but the fresh homes hitting the market are barely a trickle. If you're a buyer sitting on the sidelines just waiting for that perfect new house to show up, you're going to be waiting a lot longer, and you're going to be fighting off a lot more competition when it finally does.
So it really all boils down to this. Tight supply combined with steady local demand is the absolute engine driving this anomaly. Fresno sellers just simply have more leverage right now. They don't have to slash their prices to stand out because, well, they aren't competing with the flood of other sellers on their street. This local supply bottleneck is exactly why prices continue to rise.
Section 3. Nuances in the market.
But hey, the devil is always in the details, right? Despite the incredibly tight supply we just looked at, Fresno is not some absolute paradise where sellers could just name any price blindfolded and get it instantly. We actually see that nuance clearly in the time it takes to sell. The median days on market was 55 days. Now that is slightly faster than the national median, but it's actually up 0.9% year over year locally. So while Fresno prices were higher, sellers did have to wait just a little bit longer to get across the finish line.
Now, what's really interesting about this data is that despite the rising median price, a very meaningful 18.4% of Fresno listings actually required a price cut. That share was even up slightly from a year ago. That tells us that almost a fifth of Fresno sellers aimed just a bit too high right out of the gate and had to swallow their pride, adjusting their expectations down to meet the buyers. It just goes to prove that even in a highly supply-constrained market, buyers still have their limits.
But to keep things in perspective, let's contrast that with the national picture. Nationally, the share of homes with price cuts was 20.1%, and interestingly enough, that national number was actually declining year over year. So what does this mean for us? It means that while there are definitely targeted opportunities in Fresno for buyers who are willing to hunt for those repriced listings, sellers there are still holding firmer than the rest of the country. A smaller slice of the pie in Fresno is resorting to discounts compared to the average American city.
Section 4. Strategies for buyers and sellers.
So how do we actually navigate this reality? Let's look at some concrete strategies, starting with a crucial takeaway from the data. Sharp pricing from day one matters. Homes that lingered risked needing a cut to attract buyers. This is literally the golden rule for Fresno right now. If a seller sees the low inventory, gets greedy, and overprices their home, they are going to hit that 55-day wall we talked about earlier. And once they sit on the market, they are highly likely to be forced into that 18% group that has to issue a price cut.
If you're a buyer out there trying to navigate this, you need a dual approach. First off, because new listings are down to a trickle of just over 900 homes, you have to move fast. Seriously, when a fresh, well-priced home hits the market, you just cannot hesitate. But at the exact same time, you need patience. Your second strategy should be hunting for those targeted opportunities, that 18.4% of homes that were overpriced initially and are now sitting there on the market with a price cut. That's exactly where you might find a seller who's finally willing to negotiate.
Now, if you're a seller, your playbook is all about balancing your current leverage with a healthy dose of realism. Yes, you absolutely should use the local inventory squeeze to your advantage. The data shows Fresno prices are super resilient, so you're operating from a position of strength compared to sellers pretty much anywhere else. But you must price accurately right out of the gate. Price it sharply from day one, capture that steady local demand immediately, and whatever you do, avoid becoming a stale listing.
Which brings us to the ultimate unknown, wrapping up our analysis of this really fascinating market anomaly. Will Fresno's impressively tight inventory hold steady, allowing it to just keep bucking the national trend, or is a shift in supply finally on the horizon? Markets are always evolving, guys, and keeping an eye on whether those new listings start to creep back up will be the absolute key to predicting what happens next. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive on today's Explainer. Stay curious, and as always, keep paying attention to the data.